Let the Right One In by John Ajvide Lindqvist. I think I'm pronouncing that right, doing my best anyway. But this book is an internationally best selling Swedish novel, which has been the basis for two highly acclaimed films, one Swedish and a later American remake, as well as a Showtime original series, none of which have I seen. I think I may have watched some of one or both of the films in the past, but it's been so long I can't even really remember. But this book had been on my radar for quite some time because it was something of a sensation. So I wanted to read it. And now, having done so, I can say that I liked it. I think it had some issues. And overall, I think it's a pretty okay to good book, but I'll try to explain my rationale behind my thoughts. So, the story of Let the Right One In is that there's a young boy named Oscar, a young Swedish boy, who is bullied at school and he doesn't really have many friends and he's kind of, you know, not the best off socially. Again, gets picked on a lot. And then there is a new guy who moves into the apartment next door to him, and a young girl, or what he thinks is a young girl, that moves in with him. And then some people start getting killed in some rather gruesome manners, getting drained of blood. And then Oscar eventually develops a pretty intense friendship with this new neighbor girl, or again, what he thinks is a neighbor girl. And it's eventually revealed that the girl, or what he takes once again as being a girl, the neighbor, is actually a vampire, and the old guy is killing people to collect blood to feed the vampire. And so there's a lot in this book that happens. It's kind of lackadaisical in its plotting. In fact, I didn't really get, I didn't anticipate this book being the way it was, in that it doesn't really have so much of a plot as you'd expect for genre fiction like this. There's a pretty large cast of characters, and I'm just trying to give like the rough overview. There's a lot that happens, but it really takes its time, and it's definitely a slow burn of a book. But the main gist here is that there's a young boy named Oscar who is picked on, and he strikes up a friendship with this new neighbor girl who is not actually a girl, as it's later revealed, is actually a vampire castrato, I guess, because and the backstory behind the vampire girl boy, named Eli Elias, is kind of confusing. I still don't really understand what happened. Like, so the his friend is like actually 200 years old, but they're stuck in like a 12-year-old's body, and they were originally a boy who was castrated for some reason a long time ago when they were turned into a vampire. Don't understand much about the backstory because again, it's kind of vague a little bit. But anyway, so they hit it off, and then some other people end up getting turned into vampires over the course of the book, and things kind of get out of hand. So that's about as much as I can summarize the plot. So let's talk about the pros and cons of this book. Let's talk about the pieces that comprise the whole. So the writing in this book is what I had the biggest issue with, and this is a translation. Again, I don't speak Swedish, so I'll cut it a little slack, but I don't think that you can blame a lot of this on the translation because the overall style of this is very, very, very dry. There is very little metaphor or simile to the writing in this book. It's just direct, concise description, often in very clipped and actually not entirely proper sentences. And there's not much flair to it. Again, it reads very dryly. It reads very kind of coldly. So I wasn't a huge fan of the writing, but beyond just the overall style, there were some instances in this book where I thought things could have been worded a little bit better. And I'll read some of these instances because I've memorized the page numbers of the most egregious examples. So let's read this line right here. The vodka shot down his throat in fiery flames, licking his stomach. Fiery flames. Is there any other kind of flames besides the fiery kind? Again, that's, you might say that's just minor, you're just nitpicking, but still, that kind of jumped out at me. That could have been worded a little bit better. But then let's jump over here a couple more pages and let's read this line right here. It was not satisfactory. It was not satisfying, comma, satisfactory. Why write the two words that mean basically the same thing back to back? That's redundant. It was not satisfying, satisfactory. You could have just said it was not satisfactory. I mean, saved you a word there. Again, maybe I'm nitpicking, but I think there is kind of that there were places in this book where things could have been worded better. Like another instance right here, a shooting sensation. This is an instance where the vampire kid is turning into vampire, going full vampire mode. A shooting sensation ran through each tooth as Eli thought them sharp. The enamel bulged out, was sharpened by an invisible file, became sharp. It was sharpened and it became sharp. Things do tend to get sharp when they're sharpened. I mean, again, it's just such a redundancy here. You could have just stopped and said they were sharpened, but then you say they were sharpened and they became sharp. Again, it's just a little, the things could have been worded better here. And then we have um, this place right here, which is, hang on, bear with me. Bear with me. Bear with me. Oh, yeah, right here. He suppressed a sob, tears rising in his throat. Last time I cried, tears did not come out of my throat. They came out of my eyes. Like, I get what it's saying. I mean, I do understand what it's, what it's trying to get across. But again, it could have been worded better. He suppressed a sob, tears rising in his throat. Again, tears don't come out of your throat; they come out of your eyes. I mean, like I said, I know what he's trying to say, but it could have been worded better. And that was kind of the whole effect of this book. There were so many instances where I was like, this really could have been worded a bit better than it was. But so the writing, it's passable, I guess. Very, very dry, very disconnected. Not much metaphor or simile at all in here. It's just kind of direct, simple description of actions and events. Again, not much flair, very coldly reading kind of. And then, like I just pointed out, there were a lot of places where I thought things could have been worded better. So, overall, the writing is passable, I guess, could have been better. But let's talk about the characters now. So, the characters in this book were also passable. Like I said, it has a very large cast of characters, and I don't think it necessarily needed to. There were a lot of characters in this book, and not all of them were sufficiently fleshed out, really. In fact, Oscar is really like, I mean, he is the main character. He's the one that it all kind of revolves around. And he was really the only one that was adequately rounded, I felt. Like, he's the only one that you really kind of feel much connection to. There are subplots in this book involving the guy who works for the vampire kid who kills people to collect their blood, and his story was pretty interesting. Actually, he was probably the second best character in the book. And by the way, this book is dark too. There is a lot of pedophilia in this book. I did not anticipate that. I did not expect this book to get quite as dark as it did. I mean, it's a horror novel, so I was anticipating some gore, but not quite the darkness that it gave me. Again, a lot of pedophilia in this book, but he was an okay character as well. But then the other characters, like the neighborhood drunks that get preyed upon by the vampire kid, who eventually try to like kill the vampire, they just weren't that good. You didn't really connect with them. And again, there were other characters as well that I just don't really think needed to be in here. It's a longer book. It's almost like 500 pages long. And I don't think it needed to be that long. There were characters in this that could have been truncated. Their roles in the story could have been truncated and shortened and saved some time and page space. But where it counts, I guess, with the main character, it's good enough. So again, it's passable. And as for the overall story of the book, again, it's definitely a slow burn. I did not really know what to expect going into this, but I thought it would have more of a plot than it did. And it really is kind of lackadaisical in its plotting. It definitely develops very slowly, and it was interesting. It really was. It kept me hooked, but it didn't really have a whole lot of momentum going forward. I don't know. That's probably just me. I think this book is just all around decent. It's a very okay book. I think that's how I took it at least. As for the themes of the story, there's some good stuff in here about like friendship and stuff, as well as kind of existential angst. There's a lot of angst in this book about Oscar and how he sees himself in the world as someone who just kind of marginally exists. And that stuff kind of cuts to the quick, actually. So that was pretty good and added some real emotion to the book where it really needed it. So overall, this book is, again, just a pretty okay book, I thought. It's not the greatest thing I've ever read, but I did enjoy it, and overall, I can say that I liked it. So to rate Let the Right One In by John Ajvide Lindqvist, I'm going to give this book a C plus. I do think it could have been done better, especially in the writing. But like I said, on the whole, it's an okay book. I did enjoy my time with it, even though I do think it could have done some things a little bit better. But anyway, have you read Let the Right One In by John Ajvide Lindqvist? If you have, let me know down in the comments what you thought about it, whether you have agreed or disagreed with anything I've said about it here today, as well if you've seen one or both of the films or watched the show that's apparently based on this book. Man, this book gets a lot of adaptations. Um, and if you haven't read Let the Right One In, I could recommend it, maybe not so forcefully as I might, but I could recommend it. It's a pretty good book. It's kind of has a neat take on the vampire myth. There is some kind of cool stuff in here about the anatomy of the vampire, the people who get bit by the vampire that I thought was kind of cool. It kind of hybridizes the old like Dracula, Salem's Lot type supernatural vampires with like modern I Am Legend type biological vampires, which I kind of liked. It was kind of the best of both worlds. So it does have some good stuff in it. So I could recommend it, but just maybe a little bit reservedly. But anyway, as always, if you have enjoyed anything you've seen or heard here today, remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, peace.